Thank you, Fusatsu. Um, I'm located south of Atlanta, and can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I think. Good. South of Atlanta in a semi-rural area. Um, we, we've been uh, with a small Zendo here located between two small towns, Peachtree City and Fayetteville, and have been running for about 3 years now. Um, I'll have to say, Soto Zen or Buddhism in any form is not something that tickles people's fancy down here. We uh, market ourselves, so to speak, on Meetup, and we have at this point about 129 followers on Meetup, which sounds really good. Of that 129, approximately 10 over 3 years have showed up at one time or another. But we've been fortunate in having the opportunity to set up each Saturday a Zendo in the waiting room of a local acupuncturist office. And so we've met every Saturday for about 2.5 years in that location. But when the pandemic set in, it became apparent that this was not a good place for us to be able to sit and socially distance when we did have people come in. So after some discussion with Hojo, we decided that we would be better off, both individually and for those who might come to join us, simply to stop hosting in-person meditation. And so we went off the air, so to speak, for a month or so. But during that time, it felt like we were really missing something. And so, in consultation with two of our members, our regular members, one of whom is our host, and the other of whom is someone who joined us within the last year, we elected to begin doing Saturday Zoom meditations. Um, so we've been doing that since late spring. But we also had the opportunity of doing some outdoor meditation. I actually live in a small community of about 150 homes. But we're fortunate in having a lake on the property with a huge oak tree. And so every Sunday morning, I've been setting up a small, I wouldn't call it a zendo, but a group of zafus and zabutons or chairs with a sign inviting anyone who'd like to meditate to join us. So we've been doing that for about 3 months. I call it a raging success because we've had 3 people come to sit with us, some of whom have come back. But it has been a question to me how to best make available the practice, meditation, Buddhism, or Soto Zen in a way that suits the needs of our really semi-rural community. So what I wanted to ask is, for those of you who are here, what has been the problem that you've had to face that's most severe in maintaining your group's practice, and what has worked best, and perhaps more importantly, what has not worked at all? So that's our background. I'm going to start off with some comments that I received from several people. I have one here from the Jacksonville Zen group. Bill Mayhew. And Bill tells us that he has continued online. They've shortened their sittings to one 25-minute sitting and expanded discussion for as long as the group wants to talk. It seems like they need more conversation than when they met in person, and he thinks it's because people are simply getting lonely sitting at home. They meet in a church, a Unitarian Universalist church, and the church closed down all operations so that they've had to deal with that, and the church has given them permission to continue holding meetings outside the church buildings on the grounds. They're set up so that they do a different speaker each Monday. Hojo comes on and joins them on the second Monday. Bill Mayhew takes the third, and then the fourth is an open discussion. And they have what I would regard as a good turnout. They have 6 to 8 people joining them on Mondays and 4 to 6 on Saturdays. Sankey in Wichita has given a much more detailed account, and I'll just do some highlights from that. I'm looking to see if Sankey is on. I don't think so. So he says that they've been meeting outside in the spring and summer with social distancing between cushions and masks when they're not sitting or chanting. They've decided that it's not safe to be within a group, even outside with social distancing, so that they're beginning to conduct a Zoom Jukai class. It's a discussion group that includes 6 people. They're doing readings in Uchiyama's Opening the Hand of Thought. Their meetings are less formal than when they had an actual Zendo room. They sit under the trees on the campus of a United Church of Christ church. So some of their members have moved on. Let's see, they do kenhin, walking through the grounds of the church. They bow, as he says, almost as much as ever to each other, to the cushion. Since we don't have an altar, no Buddha bows. But he tells everyone Buddha is here, just in the trees and grass, buildings and sidewalks. He usually gives a Dharma talk or does a short reading. And some of the comments that he has gotten is that people are saying it'll be hard to go back to sitting in the Zendo after having done extensive sitting in the spring and summer outside. And of course, others say they really miss the Zendo. So they communicate via an email list. They've been having good turnouts between 7 and 11 people. So that's the report from Wichita. And so I'll be interested in reports from any of you online about how you're handling your groups in the midst of COVID, what has worked well for you, what's been problematic. So are there any volunteers?
And folks, either just raise your hand, come off of mute, or if you're having thoughts while someone else is speaking, please feel free to put that in the chat. And we'll just be respectful of each other, just like we would be together. So please, I have you all the squares, the Hollywood squares up, so we can see each other. This is a collaborative process. Again, so Seigetsu, thank you for your initial comments, but let's open the floor up and have this conversation. Okay, I'll start us off. Oh, go ahead, John Ross, please, the Richmond.
Hello. I'll try to make this quick, but we've actually had a pretty vibrant practice ever since COVID-19 started. To give you an idea, one of the things is that we maintain a database of like our people and their levels of participation to try to keep communications going with them. As far as actual membership, we have about 25 formal members. Then we have another group of about 35, which includes that 25 formal members, that weekly get a communication called ops tracks, where we keep them informed as to everything that's going to take place so that they know what's going on. Then we have another newsletter that goes out called a tiny letter to almost 400 people. And there are people that have indicated an interest in our practice. We get an open rate of about 45% on that, which is real strong. And we're always encouraging them, if they have an interest in our practice, to get in touch with us. What we've experienced is that we have 5 practices a week. 4 of them are via Zoom, and 1 of them is outside. We typically will have 6 to 25 people at all of the practices. One thing too, to get people involved too, is that a normal practice, we will have, like, in addition to our priest who will be hosting, if he's not available, me or another person will host, but we'll pull other people involved in it as well. So we'll be sharing hosts as co-hosts. We'll have the priest who will be the host. I'm usually the Doan. We'll have a Kyoko to do chants. We have a person at the end that gives announcements. And then we have a door watch, as you know, April, to let people in and to watch what's going on. Sometimes, like the Doan, if it's a smaller group, we'll also do door watch. But it keeps the whole group, even though it may be 20, 25 of us that could be sitting, or it could be 6, you have different people that are involved in the whole Zoom process. Give you an idea, like Sundays is our biggest day. We have 2 sets of Zazen, 1 set of Kinhin. Our sets of Zazen are 30 minutes. Then we have a service, and then we have a book study. So that's our normal base practice, and it's going quite well. Other things we do is that we've got, separate from that, because we have a couple extra days, we always have some type of study group going on. We just finished doing a study group for several days on the Gingo Koan. We also have been doing things like we're attending, and we've got one more session on this through the San Francisco Zen Center, a 6-session program. They're 2 hours each session on unpacking the whiteness of leadership. And we also have, a lot of our group recently participated in a Shohako Shishin, and it was a Genzo A Shishin, and we had quite a few people, and to encourage, actually he said 2 that we've had people participate in, and then to encourage people to participate, we've offered scholarships. Since we've been fortunate that our Dana has continued at about the same level, it's coming in mostly via PayPal. And since we're not spending money on some other things, we have been offering scholarships to people that have wanted to go to several of these programs. After the programs, then we typically will have like a day or two, not a day or two, but a couple hours study group afterwards to discuss it. So it's like we've actually almost had too much Zen at times. So it's worked well that it's kept people involved and people coming back. So that's like what's been happening with us. The latest thing, then I'll stop, is that at our Zendo, we have built an outdoor platform, and we just completed it about 2 weeks ago. And it's a Han type of platform. So you can put your Zabuton, Zafus on it, and we're social distance, and we can get about 20 people in our garden area. And some groups have already started to practice in it. We actually, at our Sangha, have 7 different Buddhist groups. The Zen group is the largest, so we share the same building. But it's really nice now that we're actually going to be able to take and do like sits outside by our Sangha. So that's some of the things that we're doing. So if you have any questions, certainly ask me.
John, can you hear me?
I hear you quite well.
I just was wondering if you could fill them in on the fundraising course you all attended.
There was another thing. 3 of us board members went to a fundraising course, and this was also offered through the Houston Zen Center and San Francisco Zen Center. And it was given by a person called Tom Bruner. And he's a long-term Buddhist, a great fund collector. And it was a three-part session. And it was just really came right down to the basics, is that there's a spiritual side to what we're doing, and there's an operational side, and that there's so many zendos throughout the country that are facing like not being able to pay the rent. So he got into the real basics, not more than basics, of fundraising. And we went through like how to develop campaigns. One of the key things, again, is like with fundraising, you got to have a database of who you're like looking at. He also addressed a thing that's hard for us Buddhists, that it's okay to ask for money. You just have to have your narrative, your story. You're not going to twist arms, and if somebody just says, I can't do anymore, you just move away. But we actually built our own campaigns and presented them to the group. There were about 30 different people that participated in it. He's given the same program over the last 2 months 3 times. So that's about 100 people that have gone through his program. I think what I could hear is that it was difficult for us as Buddhists to think in terms of like asking for money, but then the realization came that we needed money to operate for whatever our plans were, and some things that we typically don't think about. So I learned a lot from it. We have developed our own plan for our Zen program for Richmond Zen. A key part, though, when you get into fundraising is whatever you're going to do is you have to ask yourself why. Why are you doing this? And in a lot of zendos, you may not need to take and have fundraising. You may have like all the funds needed for whatever you're going to do. Most cases, from what I could see in this course, is that lots of people were falling short. So, Sensei, did that help some?
Yeah, that was very helpful. You said there were 3 or 4 categories that they raised around kinds of fundraising and for what purposes.
Typically with fundraising, when you're doing fundraising, it was best to have like a fundraiser for one major thing so that you don't confuse people. Now, within that same contained thing, there may be like 3 different things that you're looking for that build your narrative around fundraising for a particular program. Things that typically come in mind are like renovations, maybe buying land to build a Zendo on, or buy a building somewhere. But then there's things that we tend not to think about. Is that an issue that Tom Bruner brought up was that we don't think in terms of like funding our senior priest. It's a great job to retire into, but not a good one to retire out of. So he brought up things like fundraising for all of these types of things. So it was like really got you to think, like, what do we need and why do we need to do these things? Did that help a little bit, Sensei? I'm not hearing you, Sensei.
Yeah, that's a lot more detailed than you and I had gone over, but I think it's important for everybody to understand that our situation is not unique. We're very lucky to have the kind of board of directors, the kind of supporting membership, and especially, April and her online crew have just done miracles for us in the near past. And we continue to attract very strong practitioners. I've been surprised that online, where we used to get a lot of tire kickers or students, Emory and other universities, when we were meeting in person, we'd get 30, 40, sometimes more on a Wednesday night. And they'd all sign up. And I just recently sent a message out to, we keep their names separately, newcomers, as well as add them to the database. And Brian, who has been our practice leader for community for several years. He would the names would be keyed in by our bookkeeper. She would send them to me and Brian, the new addresses, and then Brian would send out a nice welcome letter. I'm your community practice leader. Any questions you have? And I would sometimes send them a note reminding them of an upcoming event that they may not have seen. And so we try to do outreach like that and let newcomers know that we know they came. We're responding and welcoming them, inviting them back. And I recently sent out a note to list from 2016, 17, and 18. There were over 300 names on the list. So far, this was just in the last week, so far I've gotten back 2 responses that wanted their name taken off the list. I asked them if, right up front, if you want to be taken off the list. Out of that 300, and only had about 4 bounce backs, 4, maybe 6, and a couple of positive responses. So we think it's important to continue that kind of outreach and let our community know that we're thinking of them. We know they're there. This note I sent out had, amongst other things, it reminded people of my podcast, which is a new program. I did not remind them of this retreat because April Fusatsu had said we'd already gotten to our 50 or so members, and I thought it might, if people started maybe overloading the circuits, if I had invited them to this. But I did send them links to collateral such as the home practice manual, the Sitting with Sensei recordings, and so forth. So I think it's important to understand that the Sangha is much bigger, and that's one of the benefits, I think, of this online retreat that we're having. Our community is much larger than what we see in person. And in the early days, starting back in around 2000, 2003, I started traveling to all of the, or long before that really, in the 90s, traveling to various affiliates. So I had a picture of the community in mind, but very few other people had. So we in person, we were encouraging people to travel if they could, or when they were traveling, to stop by one of our affiliates and get to know the people there. So now, fortunately, I think one of the benefits of the digital and unexpected benefit of the sheltering in place kind of approach that we're having to do now and go online is we're getting to know the larger community much better and seeing who it really consists of.
Yeah.
And John first came to us through Jacksonville, which was Roger Cochran's startup group in Jacksonville, very successful group. Bill Mayhew is still running it, Ungan. And they have very good attendance online and very good attendance in person. They're sitting outside the church now, the Unitarian Church. And that's working. And we even did a Wi-Fi conference when they were all sitting outdoors. So somehow they're sitting up under the roof, I think. Roger, you're familiar with the church, on that outdoor porch, and apparently they have good Wi-Fi connections there. So you have to ask yourself, what would Dogen have done? What would Buddha have done?
Yeah.
I think we're doing our best, I think.
Yeah.
Sengaku.
Good to see you, and thank you very much for heading up this segment. The Falmouth Soto Zen Sangha this is our 10th anniversary. We've been in existence for 10 years. We also work at a close relationship with the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Falmouth that has housed us for 10 years. They kicked us out along with all the members of the fellowship in late March. So up here, everything has been online in Massachusetts. It's been rather consistently no gathering. That still is the case. We began online sitting in late March, and have been doing it ever since. We sit every morning from 6:30 to 7:15, and then every Tuesday night we have our service from 7 till about 8:30ish. We are lucky. I'm going to say we are excited. that we have a lot of activity around Zoom. Our morning sits run from anywhere from 4 to 9. Our evening Tuesday nights, from 7 to 12. So we are seeing a lot of people, a lot of hours each week. One of the things that has not gone as well for us is that we had an active involvement with the local alcoholic and drug rehabilitation centers, a couple of different ones. And we'd been going in person I've been doing it now for 4 years, and other members of our Sangha also are involved. So we found that we could not do that online. And the reason for it was that they are not allowed to show the faces of people in these centers. They could hear us and see us, but we couldn't see them, and it simply did not work out well. Some interesting things coming out of that is some people have dropped in and out of our morning sits that were involved with those activities. The other things that we do, kind of paralleling what John said in a way, is that our income has gone up over this period of time. We made a decision early on that we would continue to pay a certain percentage to the Unitarian Church, even though we haven't been there since March. I just delivered a check yesterday because they do house some of our materials there still. And we thought it was just a neighborly thing to do. We are also engaged in a new activity that I'd like to announce. We have created a Zen Women's Project. Several of the members of our Sangha, men and women, decided that we wanted to look more deeply into our women ancestors and taking our 47 ancestors that we chant their names in Busarai as a starting point. We've been actively engaged in doing that. We've been using the Hidden Lantern as a guide for about 2 years now, so we're actively involved with that. The other major thing that's going on is our Jukai practice is such now that 90% of all of the people who attend on a regular basis have taken Jukai. That's a very high number, high percentage for us. And we'll have our first Zaikai Tukudo in November. At that time, Okyo Nancy Sherwood will also be stepping into the role of practice leader. I will continue to be senior priest and founder, senior priest, and bottle washer and trash taker outer, those kinds of things, and supporting the Sangha from here on. So we're seeing a transition, we're seeing the pandemic, we're seeing a lot of new interest, but I echo what Seigetsu was saying in terms of, I think, what Sankey said. We find that what we need at this point in time is the Sangha, is the fellowship. The other things are important, but what we need now, as Matsuroku Roshi said, is to be kind to one another, to be reaching out and supportive. We've got people that are going in our Sangha, a lot of different issues. And this is the time to increase that responsiveness. And I know several members here are also involved in a STO-wide project to deal with that. Seigetsu is actually one of those. So we're very active. We're continuing to do things. We try to be engaged at the STO level as much as we can, and very much excited about what we've already seen here, and looking forward to the rest of the week. So, Kasho.
We've heard from several of our larger groups.
Yep, and we have a question, we have a comment from Emily. So Emily, please jump right in.
Yeah, hi. I would like to offer some feedback in the form of something that I think maybe is not working very well. I am 32. I have been trying to find a spiritual path for myself since I was 11. And for the last 5 years, that search has been specifically focused on finding a path within Zen and within Buddhism. But as I sit here right now, I still have never stepped foot inside a Zendo. And I know that we each have to sort of find our own way down the path, but it seems to me that maybe the trailhead has not been marked very well. That's been my experience in any case. And that's very concerning to me because I have participated in online Sangha type things with 4 different organizations during quarantine, and every single time I have been the youngest person involved. Often I have been the youngest person by a lot. And so I worry that in 40 years, am I going to be the only one left? Will there be anyone to be in my Sangha with me? And so I understand our philosophy that we welcome everyone, but we're not going to pursue anybody. I just think that there's a middle ground there where maybe we could do a better job of inviting people in. And I suppose I just wanted to offer those thoughts from the perspective of someone who is on the outside and trying very, very, very hard to get in and has still not managed to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments on that. I was trying to let my neighbors' lawn people get away from the fence so I could chat. So I'm going to let y'all talk before I comment because I have a lot of comments related to what Emily said and also to speak about some of the things that we have been chatting on in Atlanta. But I'm going to be quiet until they get through.
Let me respond to that. Emily and I have been having a weekly conversation, Dokusan, and general discussion. Which, by the way, for those of you online who don't know this, I'm available for a scheduled regular talk. If you're interested in having a dialogue, just let me know. But Emily and I have talked about getting her over to the center, and I think we have a plan for having a conference room kind of meeting for her, so she'll get to see the Zendo, and we'll do safe social distancing and so forth. But we have, I think our residents are in their mid-20s. Some of them are in their late 20s. It's typical in the history of Zen, like Master Dogen, Matsuoka Roshi when he came to America, myself when I first found Matsuoka Roshi in Chicago, we were all in our mid-20s. And I don't know if it has to do with the wiring of the brain or what, but there's a point at which we recognize our mortality or whatever, and it impels us to do something about it. I think it was Confucius who said at something like at 13 he looked around or something like that, and at 20 something he knew where he stood. There's some such quote. So I think there's a natural thing that happens that younger people, we've had teenagers, we've had adolescents, preteens, we've had people bring their children, and we have had some children's programs in the past. But I think there's a natural age at which people start to seek out something this serious and this sort of difficult to integrate into your life. And that seems to happen around the mid to late 20s. And the residents that we had formerly were like Emily in their mid 30s. And so now we have a slightly younger slant to that. But I have been, when we were in person, and those 30 or 40, or one time we had like 60 people come on a Wednesday night. We had to divide them in 2 rooms, take some in the conference room. We can seat about 40 people comfortably in our Zendo. And they were all in their teens and early 20s because they were all college students. So they're all transient, and they don't become, typically, don't become permanent members. Some do. We have some who came to us in college and have come back ever since. But what I was saying about what's happening now, the people who are attracted online seem to be older, in their 30s and perhaps older, but they seem to be much more already committed to the path. And So I think I'm just trying to give a context for, even if we do get younger people to come to the Zendo in their 20s and so forth, um, that doesn't mean they'll come back. Someday later, their life is moving very quickly. Nowadays, everybody's sort of stuck with the COVID virus, but they're moving on in their life, and they'll probably seek out a sitting group in their future, but it may be in another city, in another state. So we have come to regard the Sangha, the community, as something like our family name. Our Dharma family name is Un, after my Dharma name, Taiun, cloud. And if you look at what a cloud is, it's a condensation of a lot of um, micro pellets of water condensing, and then it evaporates. It looks like a rabbit, and then it looks like a bear, and then it looks like a duck or whatever. It keeps evolving and condensing and evaporating. And in 40 plus years of doing this, I've come to see that that's what the Sangha is. And so I agree with Emily entirely that we want as much diversity in age, gender, ethnicity. I think we want diversity across people's professions. We have an extremely wide diversity of professionals in our community, and I suspect it's true of most. If you look at the photographs of the Soto Zen Buddhist Association, where we're all there in our robes, we look like a flock of pigeons, really. It's hard. You rarely find a brown face in the crowd. It's been historically white, and this is a known issue. That doesn't mean it's racially biased. It's just historically, people who were white had the privilege and the wealth and the free time to go to Japan. And a lot of the guys who came back from Japan during the war, they were the first generation of Zen priests here because they'd been exposed to it under wartime conditions. The John Dido Loris, the Philip Kaplos, that my father's generation, that was the first generation. My generation is the second generation. And I never had the luxury of going to Japan until I was in 1987 was the first time I could go to Japan. And that's because the Zen group paid for it. I couldn't afford to do that myself. But we think it's white privilege. It looks like white privilege when you look at the photograph, but that's a historical accident. So, yeah, diversity is very important. And I just wanted to give you a little context there from my experience. It's just from my perspective.
Emily, yes.
Yeah, I guess I understand the comment that, we look around the room and it's very white, and that doesn't mean it's, biased or discriminatory or anything like that. But I think that certainly would indicate that perhaps it's not inclusive. Because if I come to the community and I am told, find your own place in the community, find out where you belong, and I look around and I see no one that looks like me, how am I supposed to know where I could belong? How am I supposed to know that that is a place for me if I'm the only one like me? So I think it is true that I don't think that's something we're doing deliberately, but I certainly think it's something that we could do a lot better.
Could I make a comment here?
Let me just make one more.
Okay.
As we say in design, if you bring me a problem, please gift wrap it in a solution.
So that's actually what I wanted to talk to a little bit, is that Zen has not historically been great at outreach, right? We kind of wait for people to come to us. So I have some experience with going, so I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I attended North Carolina State University. So when I moved back to North Carolina, I offered my services to the university to support any Buddhist group that was there. And I think this in my mind, goes a long way to addressing your question in terms of going to where more people like you are, in terms of the age demographic, but also there's a greater diversity, typically in college populations. And I found that very rewarding. That lasted for several years, and then there were some kind of competitive pressures and on-campus issues, and I went back to work, so that didn't continue to this day. But while it while I was able to do that, it was very interesting. I had one spring break. I think we had about 9 college students in Atlanta for a retreat there over spring break, and then a couple in Raleigh. One where Hojo Sensei joined us, and then we took the group to the Chapel Hill Zen Center, and so. But then what I saw is that it's a continual struggle, as Sensei mentioned, that they're college students, they graduate out, so it's a continual turnover. So I think we're definitely planting seeds for the future, but then they're also going on, getting busy in their life and their career, and it may be a while before they come back to it. But I personally feel that that kind of outreach outside of our comfort zone in the Zendo, right, is very important and very useful and can be very effective. I found it, wonderful for my practice, and I hope to be able to go back into doing that when I'm able to retire. But I think that's a big part of the solution to your question is instead of waiting for people to come to us, going more into these kinds of outreach programs. And similar also to what Sangak said, a different demographic perhaps, but still that kind of an outreach effort.
And I wanted to follow on that one too. That's a program that I've been really actively involved in. We've gone to high schools, we've gone to colleges, and in person, when we could meet in person, I was probably going to something like 10 to 12 of those kinds of outreach meetings per year by invitation. There's several professors in the various universities here, such as Mercer University. I've been invited to speak on panels there, speak in person for classes in LaGrange, which is down south on the Alabama border, and Georgia State, Georgia Tech, Emory. I was just with Emory last Thursday. They're meeting online now, but they have a Emory student Buddhist group, which Emily, you may be familiar with. But they, when they were meeting in person, there would be about 50 people in the room, and some of them were faculty members. And we go there and demonstrate Zazen and have a dialogue. And that's continuing. I have 2 more dates coming up with them this month and next month. So typically, I will be invited to meet with them in person or online, show them Zen meditation, explain the difference between Zen meditation and the others, and then we do meditation for some time, and then we have a very vigorous dialogue. So that, and in fact, two of our people on the board have been working with me as collaborators in our outreach program. We have it specifically identified as a program, and we have co-chairs of the outreach committee. And so we've been I have a file this thick of all the places that I've visited over the years and been asked to come in as a speaker. Somebody muted me?
No.
Well, I see
like I was on mute.
Tashin Sensei raised his hand, so.
Oh, go ahead, Tashin.
Okay.
I would say to Emily, perhaps you are the answer to the situation that you described. If you go to the Zendo and you stick it out for the next young person that comes through the door, it may be that they recognize themselves in your face.
And we do have younger members of the Sangha. For example, Inga Annie Wade is a young woman as well. Somebody I would say you could probably associate with. It's probably been hard to have the opportunity maybe to meet her during the COVID conditions, but there are younger members in the Sangha.
John.
Yeah, we have the same challenges too. We do some programs, and our results are very much what Sensei has indicated his was. We have a program at the University of Richmond where we actually have a chapter there where our priest has Zen programs every single week, and he's doing those via Zoom. But what happens with them is even though they're part of our group, everything is done separately with them, but they graduate leave college, and maybe will be at our Zen group for a while and then disappear. Our orientation classes are probably 3/4 of the people for orientation that come in are usually students, and a lot of those are coming from Virginia Commonwealth University. They'll come in, they may attend a class, well, they'll attend the orientation class. They may come in for a few sits of Zazen, and some will stay and then some will disappear. Now, what we've done recently, in March of this year, we had our annual board meeting, or our annual meeting for the whole Zen group. And we put 2 new people onto our board. We have 5 people on the board, and I'm on the board. 2 of the people are in their 20s. And that was like, and one of them's a person of color and the other's a female. So we're like looking now at like going a little bit deeper. Let's get some young people on our board too. But we still are struggling with this. And I think the outreach issue is an issue, is that we don't seem to do a little bit of enough outreach. But, you know, and what we've tried so far, like the University of Richmond program, it has helped some. But, you know, I still look around and I see probably in Arizona, probably about half people my age, a little bit younger, a little bit older, and then a fair amount younger. So anyway, that's just what we've been doing. I think the biggest thing is getting some people on our board that are actually under 30.
Yep. Sensei, and then I'll comment.
A quick caveat to that. We had a sitting group in the chapel at Emory for many years. And one of our priests was a professor of computer science at Emory. After he left the university, the sitting group kind of fell into disuse. And eventually I went and retrieved all the cushions and things from there. But I had met with the chaplain, the director of their chaplaincy program, and I talked to her about bringing meditation there and things like that. And she said, actually, we cannot allow you to do that because that shows favoritism to Zen or Buddhism. And we can't show favoritism to any religion. So universities have policies about this kind of thing. And she said, it's better to let us come to you. And eventually the Buddhist student group contacted us again, and then the program started up again. But now they host it. They have all their own cushions, and they'll have a room of 30, 40 people sitting there when we go over to present. And they also have all the Tibetan priests coming in and so forth. So there's a caveat that we can't simply go out and proselytize, especially on the university level, because many of them are resistant to that, and for good reason.
And if I can just add on to that, I alluded to the fact that with my university experience, there were some issues with those kinds of things. The campus cooperative ministry changed their organizational structure, and so there are organizational restrictions, minimum size to be recognized as a campus student group, things like that. And also to reiterate the point Hojo made about, it requires a lot more personal drive to maintain a group, since there is that high turnover that, you know, you are the sole point of continuity.
And Teshin, I think you can speak to Dalhousie University where you were practicing, but I also wanted to say the reason that we skew towards older age especially in the priesthood, is it takes about 12 years to get through the formal path and become a transmitted priest. It's kind of like earning a PhD. And we don't proselytize, and we don't promote to young people that we think you should become a priest. You know, we don't do that. So typically, if people get interested in Zen in their 20s or 30s, they're going to be in their 40s or 50s before they probably committed to going through the process, and maybe even older.
Yep. And
let me just piggyback on to Emily's issue about gender and race. I'm in a community of about 125 people. We have more Black families, Asian families, other ethnic groups than the general community in South Atlanta would. We've had a couple of groups start up here called Be the Bridge, and it's oriented at how do we bridge the differences between the white community and the Black community, to put it in a very broad context. So the group that meets, several of them meet, have 8 people, 4 white, 4 Black, 4 women, 4 men. And so it's an opportunity then to actually physically meet and interact with people. Now, the Be the Bridge program, interestingly, is a highly evangelical Christian program. So I'm the Buddhist there, and they know it, but it's been an opportunity for me to translate some of their evangelical Christian statements into terms that we would use in Buddhist practice. And to my joy, that's been accepted. It's like, oh, there are these links, there are these connections between what seem to be on the surface very different kinds of approaches to a spiritual life. So that is a vehicle by which I'm participating in the hopes that we can bridge in South Atlanta's and Sangha access to a broader, a more diverse gender and racial community. Sensei?
Yep. And Sensei, after Sensei, I want to get some words in before we get through the conversation. Go ahead, Sensei.
And I think Teshin probably has something to say. I just want to quick note, I meet monthly with a group out of South Korea that is an interfaith panel. I'm the Buddhist. They do have another Zen Buddhist priest from Poland who's a very interesting guy. They do many of these, and they're world peace type of movement. And almost all the people on there, from what I can tell, they're from all over the world, and they seem to be mostly in their 20s. The young people who are in the audience, and so people early ages are very interested, not only in Zen but in religion in general, and in particular, what are the differences, and people trying to figure out their own path at that age. It was very encouraging.
Usath-san, go ahead.
All right. So I was wanting to comment too on a couple of things that Amy said related to diversity. And first of all, when the programming at Atlanta Soto Zen Center when I first came, it was very challenging for me. Again, I didn't see anyone that looked like me, right? So, and then there were not a lot of women around. There were a bunch of older white guys. That is the environment that I grew up in Kentucky. So that didn't really discourage me. That made me want to get involved and engage so that people like myself, women, would feel more comfortable within the Zendo. So the other thing too is that, a lot of the web tools and a lot of the programs that were not being seen, they had a lot of great things that were offering, but we couldn't, I had to really dig for that. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to become engaged in the website team and also in the social media team and the communication team. So I realized an opportunity there because of the teaching, and it's been such a big benefit in my personal life, for years. So one of the things that I want to encourage you to do is, we've been talking back and forth, you and I, and we're engaged in other groups. And I had, spoken to Mokyo and some of the other women in the Sangha about really, stepping up and having a presence in the programming and in a voice. You won't get any changes occurring if you're not at the table to have the conversation. And again, Sensei and I, when we were talking about our book club, there was a lot of resistance in moving that online, and then COVID hit, and I'm just like, that was such an opportunity to move everything online. So we revamped ASDC's website. We revamped STO's website. It makes and again, later in my talk this week, we'll talk about utilizing social media and communication as a practice. So I'm so glad Seigetsu kind of open with this because it is a discussion that we need to have because how we present in the world is what we will attract. So if I don't see anybody like me, I'm not really, it's very difficult for me to be interested, especially in this environment, right? So I realized that as part of my path that I have to put myself out there and I have to be, have to be available to help people along the way because it is very intimidating. We don't see any people of color and when you don't see any women and when women have a, it's societal, we're not very pushy, and a lot of us aren't, except for me. A lot of people, we're not pushy going to try to get up into the conversation, just like now, right? So, I mean, we have to be very aware of where we're at and where we're sitting on the journey and our opportunities. And we have to also be willing to step forward and be the vehicle for the path. So I'm not going to get into a lot of the details about ASZC and STO because we did a revamp. We've been pushing and pulling, trying to get a lot of the programmings, but there has been a huge shift in our offering. And I feel like you and a lot of the other younger Sangha have shown up because of the work that we put out into the world. You were able to find us. So when you find us now, it is my goal and one of the things that my practice is to make sure that you have what you need along the path, whether you choose to stay or whether you choose to go. You'll have what you need and I feel connected enough to be able to show up and continue to come. So that's all I got to say. I'm going to hand it over to Tashine and we'll talk more about that later in the week.
I don't have a whole lot more to say. Abbott Ellison said to mention Dalhousie. There was a woman who was the Dr. Bethan Lloyd, who was the associate abbot for Buddhism, or the associate chaplain for Buddhism at Dal University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And she was moving away to live in residency elsewhere and asked if I would. She had attended some of our events where Abbott Elliston had come up to speak, and she asked if I'd be willing to take over that role because she was leaving. So I did, and the chaplains rotate through being the coordinator, so I took a couple of years of coordinating that as well. But the only face I can present in the Zendo is my own. The only person I can ensure will walk through the door of a Zendo is me. So if young people want to see young people in the Zendo, they need to come into the Zendo. And getting the word out, if you're expecting old fellas like me, old geezers like me, to be cutting edge in social media, you're going to be sadly disappointed. And so, when I first moved to Canada in 1981, I was a school teacher, and I would hear Canadian teachers and Canadian people complaining that textbooks in the past used in Canada had come from the United States. Well, as a dual citizen, my natural reaction was, well, maybe somebody in Canada should get off their butt and write a Canadian textbook. So I'm a little hardcore in terms of complaints. I tend to point them back at you.
Yeah, and let me pause for a second because I'm going to do a time check. I want to check in with Sensei Zinku. We're a little bit kind of off, but again, this is exactly the kind of conversation and the kind of stuff that we want to happen within the conference. So, Sensei Zinku, did you want us to try to redirect, or how did you want to flow for a little bit? Because I know we want to kind of keep to the schedule as much as possible.
Yeah, I would say let's definitely let's continue the conversation. If there's more that people want to bring up right now, I think we should find time for us to continue this throughout our retreat. I think we do need a little bit of a little zazen between this and our next event, but I don't want to stifle the discussion at this point. I think it's been a very good discussion.
Let's take one additional comment and then from Sensei. And then if you would please, if there are any other items that we want to continue on, because I think there's going to be so much opportunity for us to continue the conversation on during the week, please drop that in chat, send me an email, and then we'll make sure it gets addressed along the way. So one last comment from Sensei Ellison, and then we'll transition back over to MMZ for, and I'm Mission Mountain Zen Center. If y'all hear me say MMZ, that's what I'm referring to. I want to make sure everybody's clear. So let's take that final comment and then we'll go back to our schedule.
if memory serves, Emily, our first conversation had to do with, I can't remember if it was you or somebody else now, but having a bunch of friends, but you don't have any much close relationship with them. You go out in groups and do things fun together. And we had a program when we're in person, very simple, little business card, and people could pick them up, and it said invite a friend. And so the quickest way to have people like yourself in the Zendo, as Teshin was saying, is go to the Zendo, and then you have one person like yourself. The next step is to invite a friend, so you have bring a friend. So we encourage everybody to bring one person. If everybody brought one person, suddenly we have doubled the Sangha, assuming they come back.
All right. Again, just as a reminder, folks, if you have any other comments or questions, make sure you put the questions in the chat or in the email. Again, this is exactly what we wanted to happen and wants to continue to happen, is the engaging conversations. And I know right now, Sensei, we're at 11:32. Did you want to continue to our scheduled Zazen time and then maybe kind of go back to schedule on lunch? I'll take your direction, whichever way you're thinking is going to be good.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we will modify the Zazen period, since we don't have, what do we have left, about 45 minutes?
Mhm.
And so what I'm suggesting is, why don't we do a little walking now? Start with some kinhin, and then we'll sit down until our break. I think our next is our break for lunch.
That's right.
And so they'll give everybody a little time for things to settle, and we'll take a break and we'll come back.
All right.
And
All
the
right,
break for
everyone,
lunch
thanks so
is
much for
quarter
today.
past the hour.
So let's do the placards. People are ready to move right into it. So everyone, let's stretch our legs a little bit. We'll do a round of keen. We'll start with the placards.